In the last video, we went through how we can style our text in CSS. So we went from, a normal way of presenting our words, like here what we have for passage, and we went through how we can actually use CSS code to adjust the look of our text, add things such as underlines, and how we can capitalize different letters and that kind of thing. So now in this video, what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on our image down here. Okay, we're going to go through how we can adjust how this looks and apply different effects to it. So if you remember from the previous video, we were using the P tag to adjust our paragraph. And something else I'd like to note that I may not have made clear before is that if I was to swap this out with the H1 tag, it would then be applied to the heading instead. So let me show you that quickly. So I'm going to put H1 instead of P. Save. Refresh. And now we can see that the adjustments have instead been applied to the heading instead of the paragraph. So what is integral here, what the first thing you need to do is that you need to identify what it is you want to adjust. Okay? So in that example, I switch what I was identifying from my paragraph to my heading. So in this case, if I want to adjust my image, I'm going to have to find some way of identifying my image. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my HTML here. And let's look at the tag we use for images. So if we look up here, we can see that the heading has H1 as a tag and the paragraph has P as a tag. So in this case, remember that this is our image here. In this case, we can see that this has an img tag. Okay, so that's the tag we have to use to style our images. So I'm going to come back to my CSS and I'm going to start styling it. So I'm going to just come to a new line, put img, and we're going to use the same structure that we have here. We put in the tag and then we put in our brackets. Good. Okay, so we are ready now to start making adjustments to our image. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how you can adjust the size of it. So I'm going to set it to, let's say, something that's a bit noticeable. So I'm going to put it at 800 pixels. And the height I'm going to put also at 100 pixels. Well, 800 pixels, I should say. Forgot my semicolon, we just put it in. There and there. Good. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to look to see what happens. So if you look here, you can see that I have an equal width and an equal height. The original image does not have an equal width and height. It has a width that's much larger than its height. So let's see what's happening. So I'm going to save this, refresh. Good, so we can see that the image now has been expanded in terms of both its width and both its height, and also its height. And we can see that in this case, the height and the width are the same. Okay, so that's how you can adjust the size of your images. Okay, so another useful command is to add a border, like a frame. So you just put border, and border has 3 different attributes you can adjust. You can adjust the thickness of the border, you can adjust the color of the border, and you can also adjust the type of border you're using. So let me give an example here. So you put the size first, you put how big the border is going to be. So let's say 5 pixels. And then you put the type. So in this case, I will use a groove border because that looks kind of like a frame. And you also put the color you want the border in. So in this case, I'm going to use let's say silver border. Good. So I have my 3 attributes. I have my size, well, the thickness of the border, I have the type of border, and I also have the color. So let's see what happens. Save and refresh. It's not too noticeable. I should have made it a little bigger. But if you look right along the edge there, you can see it right there. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger. So I'm going to make it, let's say, 20 pixels. 20 px, save, refresh. Good, so now we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so you can see now that we have a border going around, and you can see that it's two-tone, it's a two-tone border. And the reason for that is the type of border I used. Okay, so if I come back and I switch it to a different type, let's say instead solid. Okay, solid, save that, refresh it, and it's just a solid, you know, just one color border, basic border going around the image. Okay, so there are about 8 different types of borders that you can apply to images in CSS. Okay, so that's pretty much how the border command works. And yeah, you have your 3 attributes, you change those attributes, and you can have different types of borders being applied to your image. So beyond that now, I'm going to look at how we can actually cause our images to get rounded corners. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to a new line, and I'm going to put border dash radius. And what this allows me to do is that this is going to allow me to round the corners of my images. So what you do is you put in a percentage value. So I can start at, let's say, 10%. And let's see what that does. So I'm going to save and refresh. And good, so now we can see that our corners, instead of being square, have now been rounded. Okay, and you can increase the intensity of this effect by continuing to increase the percentage value. So at 20%, the effect should be twice as pronounced. So let's see what that looks like. So save, refresh. Good, so you can see the effect is more intense. You can keep increasing up until you get to 50%, where it becomes a circle. Okay, and take note that the border that I applied also is adjusted in accordance with this effect. Okay, so that's how you can actually round your images and ultimately create a circle if you had a square image before. So you can crop it into a circle shape using this command. Okay, so that's our border radius. I'm gonna bring this back down to 20 though, to 10 for as I continue. So I'm just gonna change that back to 10. Good. Okay, so that's the border radius. So now what I want to talk about is I want to talk about some more commands. So another command is rotation. So we can do this by using transform. So you put transform and then rotate, and then in the brackets you have to put the value that the value in degrees that you want to rotate by. So let's say I wanted to rotate this by 30 degrees. I could put 30 degrees. You put DEG for short as a shorthand for degrees. Okay, I'm just going to put my semicolon and see the effect. So save, refresh, and now we can see that my image has been rotated by 30 degrees. Okay, so I'm gonna take this out for now. I just wanted to demonstrate this effect. In fact, I'm gonna leave this. I'm gonna leave this for now, so that we can see the different changes we've made. Okay, so good. So that's our transform. That's how we can do different effects such as rotating and so on. So that's the border. That's the border radius. So another command that we can use is that we can use filter to apply different filters and effects like contrast and grayscale and so on. So let me show you what I mean. So I can put filter and put grayscale, and then in brackets I have to put the amount that I want it to be. So I'll put it at, let's say, 30%. See what happens. Save and apply. Good, so we can see that my image now is a bit more gray compared to how it was before. Let me make the effect a bit more pronounced. So I'm going to change it from 30 to 80% and save. Refresh. Good, so we can see that we almost have a black and white image now. Okay, so that's your filter command. Alright, so the last command that I'm going to look at here is that I'm going to look at our box shadow command. And what this does is that this allows us to do to apply a shadow to our image. Okay, so I'm going to put box dash shadow, and now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you how you can apply this. So this has this has 5 different attributes you can change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the first 2 attributes as 0. Good. And I'm going to put the last 2 attributes as 10 pixels. Not the last 2, sorry. I'm going to put the following 2 at 10 pixels, and I'm going to put the last attribute as black. So the last attribute actually sets the color for our shadow. Okay, so I'm going to put my semicolon, and let's see what effect this has had on the image. So I'm going to save this, refresh. Good. So we can see that our image now has a black shadow going around the corner. Not the corner, sorry, going around the edges, sorry. And we can see that the shadow kind of has like a fuzzy kind of effect to it. And that fuzziness is caused by this third attribute here. So if I increase this to, let's say, 20 pixels, and pay close attention to how fuzzy the shadow is here. If I save that and I refresh it, you can see now that the shadow has a more fuzzy kind of effect to it. And if I come back and I take out this attribute, if I make this attribute 0, and I save that, and I check it, we can see that there's no blurriness. It looks completely solid, like if it's another border being attached to the image here. Okay. So what this 4th attribute does is that this 4th attribute actually sets how far our shadow extends away from the edge of our image. Okay. So I'm going to put back some blurriness on my image. So I'm going to put that back at 10 pixels. And I'm going to look at these 2 attributes now, the first 2 attributes. Okay, so what these do is that these 2 attributes do is that they offset the shadow either to the right or to the left of the image, or to the top and bottom of the image. Okay, so let me show you what I mean by that. So if I come here now and I put 10 pixels here for that offset, and 10 pixels here for this offset, and I save and I refresh, we can see now that our shadow appears to have disappeared from the top edge and from the left edge. Okay, but if we come down and we look here at our right and bottom edge, we can see that the shadow has actually been shifted down in this direction. And if I increase these values, so if I bring back my notepad and I put this at, let's say, 20 and 20, and I save, we can see that the shadow has now been shifted even more towards the right edge and towards the bottom edge of the image. Okay, and this can be inverted, and by inverted I mean that we can actually have this effect apply to our top and left edge instead. Okay, and notice that these effects all play nicely together. Okay, so previously we rotated our image 30 degrees and that's why it's tilting like this, and we can see that the shadow and all the other effects we applied are still kind of working together even though the rotation has been applied. Okay, so these effects all work together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invert this offset. So to invert the offset, you put a minus in front of the offset. So now instead of being instead of offsetting by 20 pixels, it's offsetting by minus 20 pixels, which means it's supposed to go now in the opposite direction. So let's see what happens. So if I save this and I refresh, there. So we can see now that the opposite is happening. So instead of shifting to the right edge of the image and to the bottom of the image, we are now shifting in the opposite directions to the top of the image and to the left of the image, okay? And this may not be very, I haven't made this clear, but these offsets can be applied individually. You don't have to shift in both directions. So for example, I could come here and I can take out one of these offsets and save it and refresh, and we can see now that the offset now is working to the top of the image, okay? And I can do it in the other way. So I can take this offset out and put the offset here instead, save, refresh, and we now see that the offset is going in one direction to the left of the image, okay? So that's pretty much how shadows work, okay? So we have these two first attributes to adjust the offset of the shadow with regards to the image. Like, how is the shadow going to be positioned with respect to the image itself? And our third attribute determines how blurry the edges of the shadow are going to be. Our fourth attribute determines the spread of the shadow from the edge of the image. And finally, our last attribute is our color. So I haven't tried changing this, but let's say I wanted this to be something else. Let's say yellow or something. Save. We can have, it's not very clear, but you know, you can see here that it's changed in color from black to yellow, okay? So we can also have different types of different colors of shadows if we want. Because shadow might imply that it only has to be black or gray or whatever, but it could be any color, okay? Okay, so that's pretty much it for the adjustments I'm going to be showing with regards to images. And something that you might be getting concerned about is that we are learning how to style the different elements on our page, but the problem is that we haven't really gone through how to organize the page properly. We haven't gone through how to allot space, how to make sure different elements are in a particular area. And that's what we're going to start covering in the next video, okay? So that's it for now.